Couple more people that hate my whistling. Let me know how much they hate it. Okay. I do kind of whistle around the house when I'm not making videos. I mean, I'll just walk around whistling. Some people say they find it comforting. Anyway, enough about the fat tattooed monkey whistling. You and I were taught in school and college, and of course that's where we go to get indoctrinated, not educated, and certainly not so edified into the mechanics of the universe. That, over here we have the logical stuff of science, microscopes, telescopes, slide rules, and calculators. And over here we got this religious garbage. It's kind of like rubbing sticks and, praying to the spaghetti moon monster. this idea, and it depends, of course, where you were taught at. If it's a public education, which was not education at all, rather indoctrination, taught how to be a good worker bee. That's essentially what they taught you, and nothing could be further from the truth. When it comes to religions, that is something I certainly so agree with, but we're not talking about religions, we're talking about metaphysics. All religions, by the way, are secularized metaphysics, and of course, as I work on the booklet on Retroduction, I have to point out something very, very important. And people don't understand, it actually confuses them. And the reason why it so deeply confuses them, as pertains to retroduction, which of course is the methodology for transcendence, is that they were never, ever even initiated into this premise, this retroductive premise of seeing what is antecedent to objectivity. And by objectivity, I mean that thing you see in the mirror when you brush your teeth, which people will call the subject. Well, that's me, that's who I am. The subject, the personal, the, Bob, Sue, Larry, so on and so forth. The logic of retroduction is actually painted by and illuminated by both the Greeks and the Indians, and I could talk about the Egyptians, I just like to focus on the Greeks and the Indians, is that there is no other methodology of transcendence. And when people ask questions to me, and of course I posted 3 articles on being antecedent, and we're talking about Platonic recollection, not recollection like, what you ate for breakfast yesterday, but being antecedent to the psychophysical. People, they try to, use their mind and their thinking processes to escape same, and it's completely ridiculous. It's like someone on the bottom of the ocean trying to bail themselves out with a bucket. You can't use the mind, and by mind I mean empirical consciousness. Mind, of course, in the Pali term chitor and the Greek word nous, is something ab extra to the psychophysical. You can't get there from here. You can't think your way out of thinking, which is, of course, completely ludicrous, is it not? Thinking is a secondary process to consubstantial consciousness. I keep using the radio analogy because it kind of paints a clear picture for people to understand. And the broadcast is an interpolation of the signal. When I turn on this radio, there's a broadcast, and that, of course, like in your car, the stereo system. You might, of course, nobody listens to radio anymore, but you could tune into a radio signal, and you could, change the bass and the treble and the fade, and, there's a million things that make it sound radically different. And that, of course, would be analogous to empirical consciousness, which is consubstantial. In other words, it doesn't go any further than that of the radio, which is tuning it and interpolating it, and of course you're tweaking it and twisting it however and wherever you want it. And that is not the signal. I mean, within that broadcast is, of course, the fundamental signal itself, and it's how it's interpolated. But people, when they try to get into this catch-22, this Mobius strips, like, I don't understand. When they ask, how do you engage in retroduction? I said, what? I don't understand. And they literally try to use their mind, which is all they've ever had their entire life. They've never been told there's something antecedent to the broadcast, to the tuning and the tweaking of the bass and the treble and the fade and all the rest of it. They think that's all there is. And that is not all there is. That is all there is relative to this phenomena. but that broadcast is consubstantial to the psychophysical. It doesn't go any further from it. And certainly not so antecedent to it, because what has a beginning in time has an end in time. The broadcast is relational only to the radio, so it would be as if the broadcast from the radio, being sentient, kind of like the Terminator, where we actually have a sentient computer code, trying to, stir itself up to imagine what transcendence would be. And like I said, you can't use thinking to transcend thinking. It's completely impossible. This antecedent anamnesis, smriti, or recollection, is disobjectification. When I say disobjectification, I use the term loosely, because I say it loosely, in that I've been talking about it now for decades. Other people find that word completely perplexing. It's like, well, what do you mean disobjectification? Well, how would I do that? Well, it is not a doing. A doing, and of course I used to do a lot of cave diving, underwater cave diving. Doing or action or agencyship could never get you there. That's like, thinking your way out of a thinking box. Once again, you're actually stirring up, the waters and silting up the silt at the bottom. I mean, that's all consciousness and mentation and thinking can do. They don't have any function other than generating, heat and more thought in the mind, not literal heat, but I'm talking about, burning wood between your ears. You can't get there from here. So there's this barrier of keyhole where someone does not even have the slightest hint to access of insight to see what is antecedent to the psychophysical. This logic of retroduction is inescapable and irreducible. I mean, the likes of Iamblichus, Plotinus, Porphyry, Numenius, Pythagoras, Iamblichus, Damascius, Syrianus, and the rest of these Platonic, Neoplatonic, Pythagorean, and who knows about the Neo-Pythagoreans, understood that this is the only methodology of transcendence, is being antecedent to the psychophysical, which is consubstantial. The psychophysical, of course, we're talking and using the radio analogy, which is nearly perfect, not ultimately perfect. This radio of phenomena, and of course the animating signal, which is interpolated and broadcast. However, the broadcast, and talking about a sentient broadcast, sees itself as that psychophysical, as the broadcast, but it has no conception of what is antecedent to this consubstantial, alive, sentient, psychophysical corpus. And people find it, and I've heard this thousands of times, literally, they find it completely perplexing, the notion of disobjectification, being antecedent to the psychophysical, because it's literally a fish out of water situation. A fish doesn't know anything other than water. Some fish actually might jump out of water and know that there's something other than water. Certainly whales do, so don't take that analogy too far, but I mean, it's like an ignorant fish. All human beings, they have no conception of anything prior to, antecedent, or other than the waters in which they swim. And those waters are, of course, thought, mentation, and empirical conscious cogitation, where things are constructed, destructed, and you're literally just swimming in a circle of mentation and empirical consciousness. It confounds them, and I understand why it confounds them. I mean, I really do. No one has ever talked about that in their life. The very idea is completely alien. But the point that I'm getting to is that the wisest minds who ever lived, vis-a-vis Plato, Plotinus, Proclus, Pythagoras, on and on and on, and Sri Sankaracharya, Gautama, the original texts of Gautama, and Upanishadic thought, they all said the same thing, that this is the only logical methodology for liberation, and liberation cannot be doing things. One is not an agent in and of samsara. this idea that one is a karman, or in Pali the term is sasaravada. In other words, there's no escape. You can either have a better this life or a better next life, but an idea of escape is completely foreign, and that of course is still the conundrum today, is that people cannot conceptualize being the signal that no longer will manifest as the radio and as the broadcast, because the radio of course is made out of countless components and it falls to dust, as everybody knows, but the broadcast is consubstantial to the radio. The signal, the broadcast, in the case of our radio analogy, has no idea that it is the signal antecedent to the psychophysical and the consubstantial nature of the radio, which is the radio and its interpolated broadcast. It's completely foreign, but it is hyperlogical, this notion that over here we have metaphysics, which is like, witches, and because if you go to a metaphysical bookstore, a bookstore, and go to the metaphysics section of a bookstore, it's a bunch of New Age garbage. White lighter, rubbing crystals and magic stones, and, people putting special crystals on their forehead, and, just a lot of real ritualistic nonsense. And that's not metaphysics, but if you go to the metaphysics of a bookstore, that's what you see. So, people are not only never taught this stuff in life, if they have the desire to know, like, I'm going to go to the library, and I'm going to go to, instead of looking at physics, people are shooting fireworks outside. It scared me for a second there. Instead of looking for physics, they think, I'm going to go look in the metaphysics. People are still shooting fireworks after the 4th. That scared me a little bit. Startled, as it were, not scared. People go to the metaphysics section, and if they have a half a brain, they're going to be turned off. Like, well, this is just a bunch of New Age fluff. Here we got chants and spells, and you you draw stuff on the ground, and you put some celery on your head, and you say a prayer to the magic spaghetti monster. That's not metaphysics. That's New Age, and it's occultish. Well, let me use the word bluntly. It's filth. It has nothing to do with wisdom, logic. The people that told the wisest minds, wiser than me and all of you combined, have all said the same thing. This is the only path of transcendence, this retroductive, and it goes by many different names, because nothing is known except in the modality of the knower. It is known by the name apophatism, via negativa, neti neti, which means not this, not that. I point that out to these Buddhists too, that these so-called ones, anyway, these soul-denying nihilists, which is what they are. I said if Buddhism actually taught that there was no soul, which of course it does not do in doctrine, you would just say, followers, there is no soul. There is no such passage. It says, Rupa anatta, Veda anatta, Sankara anatta, Vijnana anatta, Nama Rupa anatta, Te Isakaya Namisata. Why am I speaking ancient Pali? It says, this is not the soul, that's not the soul, psychophysical is not the soul. You would never do that if there were no soul. It's just a complete waste of breath. These passages repeat themselves thousands and thousands of times in doctrine. You would just say, followers, there's no soul. Really? Yes, that's right. Stop asking me about it, there's no soul. There is no such passage. There's not even anything close to it. The term anatta is just nothing other than an original Buddhist, and it's not original at all. Just neti neti, very well known to ancient Indian metaphysics vis-a-vis the Upanishads. Neti neti, apophatic method, no different than the Greeks. This retroduction, and its facets of which are apophaticism, the via negativa, is disobjectification. In other words, you are a sentient signal that has no idea that you're a signal, looking at yourself in the mirror, brushing your teeth or whatever it is you're doing, identifying with yourself as the broadcast and the radio. And you are not the broadcast or the radio. You are the signal. But you were never told that. You never taught that. You have no idea how to extract or pull out the broadcast from the radio and be completely antecedent to the psychophysical and the consubstantiality of said being. because that being is a temporal being. It had a beginning in time and it will have an end in time. Transcendence and liberation and the retroduction and the apophaticism taught by the Greeks and Indians is hyperlogical. It is both scientific, it's logical, it is analytical as hell. And this, of course, is why I'm writing that booklet on SAME. It'll be expanded into a book, but I work 7 days a week, you know. If you think I'm going to sit down and make a full-fledged book with the limited time that I have, it's not possible. I work my butt off every day, and it grinds me to a nubbin. But I like being helpful. But I also, too, have to survive. And I really wish there weren't so many bills to pay. I wish I could just concentrate on what's important. The only thing I need is like one room, a car, and a place to go recharge my batteries out in the wilderness. That's really all I need. And I need a vacation, like once a year, which I guess I'll never get. But that's a matter for another discussion. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. I hope I made it clear, kind of in a roundabout fashion. Tried to make it very simple. If you like these videos, please click the link below. And any donation is always welcome. And you can send me an email and tell me what you think, okay? Lux Veritas.